Welcome to our YouTube channel on Success and Women. Women helping women.
Come join us.
See you soon. Welcome to this week's episode of Success and Women. I'm Linda.
I'm Andrea.
And this week we're going to be talking about empowerment. But before we get started, Andrea's got her tip of the week.
Hi ladies, hope you're having a great week. Anyways, I came upon this tip and I thought, wow, what a great idea. And especially if you have a small bathroom. And even if not, I thought it looked amazing. So you get one of those shower tension rods and you can put it in your shower, I guess, against the back wall. But you know, on the bathtub, you have the longer wall. So you buy a bunch of plastic hanging baskets and you put them on the tension rod and you put it against the back wall.
Oh.
And, yeah, and in there you can have your shampoos, your soaps, if you have children, their toys, whatever you can imagine, face cloths, creams, shaving stuff, you know. And it looked so amazing, and I thought, you know, even if you didn't have a small bathroom, it would look really cute when you had the curtain rod open, you know, and if you had these cute little baskets hanging from the tension rod.
Well, I'll have to tell you, Andrea, if in my guest bathroom, the shower is extremely small.
There you go.
So, no, I'm not sure baskets would be good because you'd be bumping into them constantly.
True. No, that's true. If it's,
Because
in a shower, it's too small. Yeah.
It's too tiny.
You'd have to get those long, skinny ones that go in the corner, maybe.
Even that would be tight because
Wow.
there's not a lot of room to move around, and that's why in my building, a lot of people use these showers as storage because they just find it's too tight to move around. And well, you know, I had my bathroom renovated and I actually got it, you know, redone, and it's like, and I've used it a couple times just to see what it would be like for the guest, and it's tight. You don't want to drop anything because it's not a lot of room to move down. But I am going to get my other bathroom renovated, and that might be an idea for that one. A lot more room.
So anyways, I thought that was a really great idea.
Yeah. So, you know, we're already into the third week of January, and Andrea and I are on a cruise. You know, that we're going on a cruise, I should say, and we're going to be together for the whole week, sending you videos. Yay. We want you to watch those videos. And it's going to be really exciting because we're going to try to kind of have some fun.
Yes.
While we're on there, just go into the Instagram or TikTok, and, you know, especially if you're down, we'll try to have some funny little antics that, you know, showing and
See
sharing.
what cruise life is all about and why we love it so much.
Yeah, it's exciting actually because you want to sometimes do these things with friends. And
Yes.
when we were talking about, you know, even what we wanted to talk about this week, and, you know, the empowerment of women. So Andrew's a married lady, I'm a single lady, and, you know, like she told her husband, yeah, she goes, I want to take this cruise with Linda, and so, you know, we're doing this.
Yes,
and,
no problem.
Yeah, and it was no problem. And when we started talking about, I'll say today, and what it was like for, I'll say our parents, and in particular our mothers, what it was like for them because they were married and raising families in the 50s.
Which was the only thing expected of them, by the way.
Absolutely.
From their families, from their parents. Like, find a good husband, don't worry about education, get yourself married. And if they were lucky enough, like our mothers were, to find a partner that believed in independent women, you know, that was a plus, but
I was going to say
that wasn't always the case.
It wasn't mostly the case because you said the key word, if you found the right partner. And back in the days when our parents were getting married in the 50s, it was, I'll say, really different for them. It was more the leave it to beaver type women where you were expected to be home, raising the kids, making sure that the food was on the table when your partner came home. And our mothers were a lot different. And I'm not saying that our moms didn't cook, because they did.
Of course.
but they married guys that were, I'll say,
willing to share.
willing to share
If
responsibilities.
my mother used to have Tupperware parties and such, and my dad would grab all of us kids, throw us in the car, and take us to the drive-in movie, where there was I know a lot of men on our street would not do that for their wives. And we were talking about that, like, where did our mothers get that empowerment to be, to step up and say, you know what, I'm a person too. And I think that's the key, that a lot of women back then were just thought of as homemakers, whereas your mother, my mother, thought of themselves as a person.
Yes.
And equal to a man. Maybe not as far as working.
Or earning as much as they did, because they didn't. No matter what, they just didn't back then.
But to do things that made them happy.
You know, it's funny because my mom left home at 17, and her mother actually ran from a farm. My mother's mom, my grandmother, was a farmer's wife. And so, but my grandmother ran the post office from one of the rooms that she had in the farmhouse.
Wow.
So my grandmother was working, not just a farmer's wife, that was a lot in its day, but she also ran the local post office.
Oh, awesome.
And it's interesting because, so my mom never thought working was a bad thing anyway. She kind of knew that women worked, which was very different because my mom left the farm at 17, went to Sudbury, Ontario, where my dad was working in the mines, and they ended up getting married. Now,
did she know him before she went?
My dad actually was on one of the local farms, so they came from the same area. And actually, my dad was home from working the mines and visiting the family when my mom and him hooked up, kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so they ended up, and my mother's always been in love with my father, so. Anyway,
nice.
My dad ended up sending for my mom, and she ended up getting married in Sudbury. But the thing was, back then, all the women that she knew were more or less homemakers. When my dad would go off to work, and my dad, because he worked in the mines, actually carpooled. So that meant the family car was at home. And my mother would take it when my dad was afternoon shift. She would take the car and she'd be riding around, because they eventually moved from Sudbury to Isilda. And Isilda was a very, very tiny little town.
Far from everything, like
and so it was easy
whatnot.
for her, though, to take the car, I'll say, on sort of back roads and stuff, where she felt, she could learn to drive. But my mother did not want to be, I'll say, tied down in the sense of not having that independence.
Right.
And one of the first things that she did was learn how to drive the car when my dad was at work. So he left the keys at home and she just took off and did it. And eventually it worked out well for my father, because she didn't have to ask my dad to go grocery shopping and stuff.
Like my mother did.
Yeah, but your mother chose
not to drive. My father was more than willing, but I don't know, because my mother was so independent, such a strong woman. I mean,
you were wondering why she didn't want to drive.
Why she didn't want to drive, and maybe a fear of driving. I don't know, because we do all have fears here and there. Maybe something happened when she was living at home. I don't know. But the same thing, like, she didn't grow up in a house. My grandmother was a stay-at-home woman, but a very tough, strong, religious woman.
I was going to say, your grandmother was tough, but so was mine. And unfortunately, because of their lives, I don't like my grandmother that much.
Neither did I.
Because I just thought she was really
mean. Yeah.
That was a good way to put it. When we would go to the farm to visit, I didn't even want to get out of the car once we got there. I was enjoying the car trip up until we got to the farmhouse.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh God, because she was mean.
Very tough. My grandmother was. And
my mother was a softie. So was your mom, for the most part.
Well, my grandfather, because he was so much older, because my grandmother was his second wife. His first wife had passed away. When he married my grandmother, she was the same age as some of his kids.
Oh, very young.
So my mother, then my grandmother had my mother and two other sisters. And so she was much younger than, and maybe that's where she got it from. She was much younger than her stepsisters. So maybe they kind of encouraged her to be more independent. I don't know.
Or she felt like because she had this role that she had to be kind of on the tough side, because who would respect her if she's that young? But she was the wife of your grandfather.
Oh yeah, that woman, yeah.
Yeah.
And
oh, you're talking about your mom?
my mom.
Yeah.
So, but then, you know, she my grandfather just doted on her, loved her like you wouldn't believe. So maybe
well, he did marry a young chick. That was pretty good.
Yeah. And then she ended up leaving to work at the newspaper in Truro, Nova Scotia. My mother.
Oh, your mom did.
Yeah, so that's, I think, how she started. And I've seen pictures of her downtown in Truro, Nova Scotia, and her outfits are just amazing. I would want to wear them now.
My mom, being a farm girl, didn't have an opportunity to go anywhere and do anything. And my mother really always wanted to be a career woman. The good news is, when she did marry my dad, she was able to at least go to work, but not in her chosen field.
Right.
My mother would have had to go back to school, and which I used to encourage her as I got older, but at that point she was older, and she didn't want to, but she always wanted to be a nurse. So when she had three daughters, she always wanted one of us to be a nurse.
And none
of us did, because none of us were really, that wasn't our passion.
Right.
But it was my mother's passion her whole entire life. When
That's too bad.
It really was, because my mother used to, when they, you know, on TV watch the medical shows, when they cut people open. My mother loved all that stuff.
But you know what, Linda? We didn't have, some of us had more opportunity, but we were kind of in the same boat, you know what I mean? Not to be able to follow our passions, because it didn't change too much from our mother's generation to ours. From our generation to my kids, it's leaps and bounds as far as do what you want. Don't worry about getting married. You know, be passionate in whatever you do. Be independent.
Pick the right person.
Pick the right man.
Yep.
And I mean, I look at them when they come in the house with a fine-tooth comb, you know, and I start rhyming off what I think, you know. But back even in my day, my parents weren't, it was okay to get a high school diploma, but there was no talk about, well, what university you think you'd like to go to? What college? What would you like to be? There was really none of that talk around the house.
Yeah, we had excuse me, in our house, my dad did encourage all of us. The only thing is that being the, one of 7 children, my parents did not have the money to basically send us to post-secondary, but my dad wanted us.
Yeah,
so
and that's
one of
probably why they didn't encourage it.
But my dad did.
Yeah.
He was
okay.
really, really keen. Actually, I always, when I look back at my dad died in 1974, but I look back at that and I say, my dad was so ahead of his time, because he took hands-on, you know, for parenting and stuff. My mother would go to work. My dad would be home. My dad would be at work. My mother was at home. But so if it went around mealtime, my dad was the one who got us up for school. But my dad encouraged us. But out of 7 of us, only one of my older brothers and myself went to post-secondary.
Wow.
But it wasn't that my
true.
dad discouraged us. But back then, you didn't have to get a job.
No. That's true.
And that was
because
the thing.
we lived in a mining town.
We did,
So most
and
people
working
just-
was more important, and earning money, because we didn't have a lot of money.
There was a lot of jobs at Inco,
yes.
and a lot of people.
But even
especially
other
the
things,
guys, other
yes.
things, because it was a big bustling city.
Yeah.
Now you go, it's like a ghost town practically, you know. But back then it was. And,
But even one of my sisters ended up working for the police. And so she could get that job.
She moved, right?
She had moved out of town,
Toronto,
yes.
yeah.
Now, she had moved originally to work in a factory. And then eventually the factory, I don't know if the factory closed up. I think the factory ended up closing up, because I know it's long gone now. But, and I went there for 6 weeks. I didn't last, because that was just not my cup of tea.
No, wouldn't
it
be
was
mine either.
mindless. But she did that for a year. And then when she came, I don't think she came back to live, but she ended up going to Toronto from Stratford, and she ended up working. But again, grade 12 was enough to get you a good job.
Right. Right. That's what I
So,
did
so
too.
a lot of people didn't go on to post-secondary
Right.
because you didn't have the money. And unless there was something you really wanted to do, I went to post-secondary basically. The first time was before my father passed away. Then I dropped out of school, but I actually only finished my education after I got married.
Oh, okay.
And I lived so close to the community college. I started there
Right.
and, went on from there. But we were lucky that our parents got this empowerment somewhere along the way, but you had a
Somewhere.
strong grandmother, and
Yeah.
I had a strong grandmother as well, as much as we didn't like them. My mother was a softie, but she really got some good traits, I think, from her mom for independence.
I don't know that my mother got any from hers. I think it was maybe more from her father and maybe her step siblings because
Yeah, your mom
My-
had that. And my mom was the oldest in her family,
Yeah.
so she didn't have anybody to guide her other than
like I always laugh because I'm very much like my mother as far as the way I think. How do I say it? Like my mother didn't take crap from my dad, put it that way. And, whereas I saw a lot of women, the men could scream, yell, do like a lot of my friends' parents. Oh, I felt sick when I would go there, And but my mother talked back, I guess you could say, stuck up for herself.
She stuck. Yeah, she stood up.
Like
Yeah.
this is, I'm not. Don't talk to me this way. But my father wasn't really like that because he was so good to her,
Yeah.
and he showed it all the time. Like my mother could do whatever, and
Yeah.
my dad would just say, "Oh well."
What's interesting about the differences though with our moms, even though we got, I'll say some of our independence from our moms, my mom did not like conflict. And I mean, she did not like conflict. So if my dad said black, it was black. If my dad said white, it was white. If my dad said jump, my mother said how high. But my
He
dad
didn't abuse it.
But my dad never abused it.
Yes.
My dad
That's the
literally
key.
worked together with my mom. The only thing that I'll say where he didn't, if he didn't agree on my mom's parenting, and I'll say that because my mother wanted to keep us always in a bubble, and my dad wanted us to learn how to be independent and grow. So sometimes if we wanted to do something, my mom would not want us to do it, and yet sometimes she would allow the boys, and my dad would not allow the differences. If it was okay for my brothers, it was okay for the girls.
Right.
And my dad always said, they have a mouth, they'll use it. We have to let them grow. My mom felt uncomfortable doing that a lot.
Because of the way she was brought up.
Right.
That's the whole key is how you're brought up, right? And what you pass on to your kids and what they take from you and what they, throw out. Because
But my dad was such a
not all
good
good.
man though,
Yeah.
in the sense of he never did anything to, I'll say, like, some of our neighbors, Andrea, we both lived on the same street, and our neighbors
I never saw some of the mothers ever
because
out on the road or with
and
the
one
kids.
of your neighbors, I remember this very clearly, one of her neighbors right across the street, the husband dies. She didn't even know how to write a check. She didn't know how to shop for any clothes for herself because he did it all.
Wow.
And this was like, okay, that was a little bit over the top, but
Yeah.
this was normal.
Normal.
They
And
didn't have
like,
money for themselves
even when
without
I-
going to their husbands.
Right.
And it was like, what's it for? Bring the change
Bring
home.
the change. And I even remember going to one of my good friends, and for dinner, they invited me for dinner, and we sat down, and the father was having a steak with
Oh, I remember
potatoes,
that.
and we were just having macaroni, and I kind of looked at my friend, and she says, well, he works, and he feels that he needs more protein and food than the rest of us. My father would have died. No way would that happen in my house. But see, back then, those type of things happened. So women have been trying little by little by little to get out from underneath that kind of control.
Yes.
And that's what you need to do. And I always say the first step is marrying the right partner.
Oh, absolutely.
Don't just, because the guy shows you attention And
Or because he could pay the bills.
pay the bills.
It's not enough.
It's not enough. You have to have a 50-50 relationship. And if they're not willing to do that while you're dating and getting to know each other, then it will get way worse later. You know?
And you won't be able to put up with it, even if you think that, well, I'll change him later.
No.
It's not going to happen.
No, leopards don't change their spots like that.
No.
A man that wants to control will always want to control. So, you have to be very careful. Now, if you're the type that doesn't care, you just want to be controlled, you want to be taken care of, then that might work for you.
Yeah, but then what are you teaching
but
what are you teaching your children?
Well, I've seen it. I've seen women, even in our generation, and their children cannot speak up for themselves because, the mother never did. Or the father controlled both the parents, the wife and the children. And it's sad when you see that.
See, and that's why, looking back, we can kind of see where our independence came from.
Right.
But say you didn't have that in your own family because you were one of these women that were controlled by the husband, then maybe you have to break that pattern for your children.
For your children.
So that your children have a chance to be equal and, I'll say, independent as a person. Whether you choose to marry or not marry, that's not the problem. But dating, Dr. Laura always says, dating is to find out if you're going to have the right man.
Right man.
Because you need that partnership.
Right.
Or that's not a fit.
No.
That was dating. That's not just for having fun.
No.
It's to see whether or not it's a good match.
If your personalities are compatible, if you like to, and you don't have to love doing all the same thing, but there has to be some core things that you like to do together. Like, you like going to movies, or, he might like sports, but you might like something else. So while he's watching sports, you could do this, or if he doesn't have a problem with you. I remember a friend of mine, we met and we really got along with them, and I thought, this is going to be great. And then one day I said to her, I'm going to somebody's house. They were having a jewelry party for ladies. And I asked her if she wanted to go, and her husband right away said, without me? And I said, what do you mean? It's just for ladies. No. She doesn't go nowhere without me. I was shocked in this day and age. So you have
that
to be...
was in this day and age?
Yes.
Because I remember some of these happening, I'm going to say, in the old days. That's why the wives weren't allowed to go. Because it wasn't a place that the guys wanted to go, and they were not letting the women out, and probably because they didn't want them being influenced by other women.
Right. Yeah, that was this day and age. And
Wow.
I was shocked.
Wow.
Totally shocked.
I'd like to have a guy tell me I can't do something without him. Yeah.
Exactly.
Like that's going to happen.
Like
no wonder
that's
I'm single.
happen. No, but I'm not single.
I know.
Nobody tells me that I can't do this or do that. Like, I mean, I like with the cruise, I wouldn't just go up and say, hey, I'm going on a cruise. I'd say, Linda asked me, and, what do you think? And he'd say, yeah, go for it, So, we went to China together. I went to Israel with a group. And so you have to have your separate times together too. Apart. Eddie used to always do the Formula One races. And I never had an issue with that, and some friends would say to me, oh, you don't care that he travels like, Spain? Why would I care?
There's got to be trust as well,
exactly.
In a relationship.
And I have my free time also while he's gone.
That's
for 3-4
true.
days.
That's true. Anyway, we hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Success in Women, but tune in next week because we plan to continue this conversation on empowering women.
Find your inner empowerment.
Yes. So, if you liked the episode, we hope that you
share it,
subscribe,
and enjoy.
Give us some thumbs
up. Yes.
I'm Linda.
I'm Andrea.
We'll see you next week.
Have a great week.